Two of the world's great powers are locked in the rivalry that will define this century, and both of them have quietly staked their plans on the very same road. It runs from western China, across Kazakhstan, over the Caspian Sea, through the Caucasus, into Turkey, and on to Europe. It's called the Middle Corridor. Beijing has come to depend on it. And Washington, the one power you'd expect to want its strangles, has decided it would rather the road work than see it fail. Not out of goodwill, but because a functioning corridor turns out to serve American interests better than a broken one ever could. The trouble is that the whole arrangement only holds while a narrow window stays open. I'm Bruce Pannier. I spent 4 decades covering the former Soviet Union. This is Turan Research Center, hosted by the Yorktown Institute, where we break down the geopolitics of Turkey, Iran, the Caucasus, and Central Asia. If you're new here and want more analysis like this, please like, subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's get into it. Beijing didn't set out to make this road so important. Its other options simply closed one after another. The original idea behind the Belt and Road was redundancy. Many overland routes to Europe so that no single one could ever be cut. Then sanctions shut down the northern route through Russia, and the risk of escalation fell across the southern branches through Iran. Take those away, and in strictly economic terms, the Middle Corridor became the only dependable land route to Europe that China has left. Underneath the commercial worry sits a deeper one. If China ever collided with the United States in the Pacific, its sea lanes, the Straits of Malacca, first among them, could be choked off in a matter of days. A working land bridge across Eurasia is an insurance policy against a blockade that Beijing could not otherwise escape. That leaves China holding a contradiction it can't resolve. Politically, it stays tied to Russia and Iran to push back against American power. But economically, its safest path to Europe now runs through a string of countries where American and European influence is strong: Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, Georgia, Turkey. Beijing is underwriting Moscow and Tehran while betting its trade future on a corridor that neither of them controls. Now, turn it around and look from Washington, because this is where it gets interesting. The American economy doesn't need this corridor. China's economy increasingly does. That imbalance is the heart of the matter, because it quietly turns the trade route into a source of leverage. Every mile of the corridor that gets built, and every ton of cargo that comes to rely on it, raises the price Beijing would pay for any large confrontation in Central Eurasia. And it gives China a steady reason to behave predictably there. Washington gains that leverage without having to spend to match it, precisely because it isn't the one that depends on the road. But there's a concrete prize here too, not just leverage. Central Asia holds substantial deposits of critical minerals and rare earth elements, the raw materials that go into everything from electric vehicles and wind turbines to guided weapons and semiconductors. And China's real chokehold on that market isn't the mining, it's the processing. Beijing refines the majority of the world's rare earths, which means it can throttle supply almost at will. The Middle Corridor offers a way around that. A functioning westward route lets Central Asian minerals reach European and American markets without passing through China, without transiting Russia, and without depending on Iran. For Washington, that's a supply chain security you can put your finger on, a way to loosen Beijing's grip on materials the entire modern economy runs on. So, the American stake in this road isn't abstract strategy, it's access. For all those reasons, the goal in Washington isn't to own the corridor, it's to keep it open. Keep it multilateral, and above all, keep it from hardening into a closed system under China's exclusive control. Here's where the story cuts against the usual script. Rivalry and cooperation aren't mutually exclusive on this road. They're being forced to coexist. The nearest model is the late Cold War, when Washington and Moscow kept open channels and agreed upon rules precisely so that competition wouldn't tip into disaster. Apply that here, and the danger being managed is the world economy fracturing into sealed, hostile blocks. A shared corridor works against that outcome, because once breaking the system becomes too expensive for everyone who relies on it, the system tends to hold together on its own. And there's a genuinely positive-sum version of this worth spelling out. almost everyone at the table wants the same practical thing, a corridor that stays open and reliable. The regional states want the transit revenue and the freedom to maneuver. Europe wants a dependable route east that doesn't run through Russia. Washington wants leverage, minerals, and stable partners. Even Beijing wants a road that keeps functioning. That's an unusually wide overlap of interests, and it points toward a shared management rather than a scramble for control. A distributed model spanning the Central Asian and Caucasus states, Turkey, the European Union, and international financial institutions, and yes, China itself. The lenders make that easier. The World Bank, the EBRD, the IFC can finance the ports, the digitalization, the customs upgrades, and because they're multilateral, the money doesn't stamp the corridor as anyone's geopolitical project. If Beijing reads the road as a reasonably neutral, predictable system it can keep using, its incentive to invest holds. It's the moment the corridor starts to look like a tool for boxing China out that Chinese support drains away and the contest turns into a fight for control. Notice too who actually keeps the whole thing open. Not the great powers, the middle powers. The Central Asian states, the South Caucasus, and Turkey, whose drive to maximize transit and play every side at once is exactly what stops any single power from capturing the route. Their stability has taken on real economic value, and they're well aware of the hand they now hold. There are limits, and they're worth stating plainly. This corridor can shape behavior on trade, logistics, and regional policy. It won't decide an existential fight, something like Taiwan, where military control would override every economic calculation. But most of the daily business of geopolitics happens well below that line, and that's the ground where a road like this can matter. A few things could close the window. If Russia and the West found their way to some accommodation, the northern route would regain its appeal, and China's interest in the middle corridor would slacken. Calmer Iran would do the same thing for the southern branches. A sharp turn toward U.S.-China confrontation would dissolve the space for any coordination at all, and new routes across a warming Arctic or through some new shipping arrangement could redraw the cargo map and pull traffic elsewhere. So the real task is converting a temporary convergence into something durable, locking in the coordination and the long-term investment now while the alignment still holds. Do that, and the corridor keeps its relevance after the political weather changes. Fail, and it stays a stopgap that loses its purpose at the first realignment. Look closely at the South Caucasus leg, because the corridor has only one door there. Once cargo crosses the Caspian and lands in Azerbaijan, the single open land bridge onward to Turkey and Europe runs through Georgia, for the simple reason that Armenia's borders with both Azerbaijan and Turkey have been sealed shut for decades. Everything funnels through one Georgian corridor, and that corridor is badly exposed. The main east-west highway and the pipelines carrying Caspian oil to the Black Sea thread through a narrow waste of Georgian land that sits directly beneath Russian-occupied South Ossetia. In the years after the 2008 war, Russian forces steadily pushed the boundary line southward, a practice Georgians call borderization, at one point in 2015 leaving roughly a mile-long stretch of Baku-Supsa pipeline on the occupied side of the fence, with the frontier at places settling within about a kilometer of the highway. That advance has largely stalled since Russia poured its resources into the war in Ukraine. But the threat never really goes away. The seized ground stays seized. The line sits right on top of the corridor's most vital infrastructure, and Moscow can pick the fence back up whenever it suits. It has never had to fire a shot to keep a hand in this route. This is the vulnerability that TRIPP is meant to answer.
I have no doubt that it will happen. One of the reasons is that, again, United States played a crucial role in this process. And the route which will connect two parts of Azerbaijan through Armenia and even more will stretch to European continent carries the name of President Trump. It's Trump Route for International Peace and Prosperity.
And it came out of the U.S. brokered peace deal between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
I want to thank President Trump and his team for brokering this game-changing outcome between Armenia and Azerbaijan.
The route runs across a roughly 30-kilometer strip of southern Armenia, the sliver of land that separates mainland Azerbaijan from its Nakhichevan exclave and beyond it, Turkey. The arrangement is unusual. The land stays Armenian and operates under Armenian law. That part matters, and Yerevan fought hard for it. But the United States holds exclusive rights to develop the strip for 99 years, subleasing it to a consortium that would build the rail, the pipelines, and the fiber optic lines running through it, with an American-led company holding the controlling stake for the first half-century. What that gives the corridor is a second door, through the South Caucasus. A southern route that runs well below Georgia and South Ossetia, out of Russia's reach, and much harder for Moscow, Tehran, or Beijing to pinch closed. Predictably, Russia and Iran have condemned the whole thing as American encroachment in their backyard.
For the future, going to be an important asset for the countries in the region, for the world trade. So I think we must do everything possible to realize it. Of course, it has many hurdles, but I think supporting each other, we will be able to overcome all the hurdles.
But a second door is not a replacement door. Not yet, and not for years. Even fully operational, the Armenian route is a thin strip that carries almost none of the rail, road, and pipeline capacity Georgia has spent 2 decades building out. Without heavy new investment to match that, TRIPP is an alternative on paper more than in tonnage, a relief valve, not a substitute. For the foreseeable future, the corridor still leans on Georgia, which is exactly why Georgia's stability and the Russian line hanging over it will keep mattering. Which leaves the question of what Washington should really be competing over. And it isn't the road itself. The reflex is to treat the corridor as one more place to contain China and cut Beijing out. But that approach would undermine the very stability that makes the road useful in the first place. The regional states have no interest in being enlisted into an anti-Chinese coalition. What they want is more transit, more investment, and more room to maneuver. Push too hard to weaponize the corridor, and China stops cooperating and starts fighting for control of it. The more durable play is to compete over the rules. In a modern economy, the real contest is moved off the physical route and onto the standards that govern it. How procurement is done, how corruption is policed, how data and cybersecurity and customs are handled, how the separate national segments connect. Today, the corridor isn't one smooth artery. It's a chain of national links: Chinese, Kazakh, Azerbaijani, Turkish, European, each one adding cost, paperwork, and delay. Whoever writes those rules that stitch the links into a single system ends up shaping the whole thing. That's the contest Washington is best positioned to win, and the one it's most likely to neglect because Central Eurasia has always sat in the limited interest, limited means corner of American strategy, while the Middle East, Europe, and the Pacific pull attention away. So, the choice comes down to 2 very different maps. One is Eurasia of sealed, suspicious blocks. The other is Eurasia of managed interconnection that can absorb shocks and take some of the heat out of the conflict. It's the same road either way. The only real question is whose rules it runs on, and the price of hesitating isn't a worse bargain down the line. It's having no seat at the table when those rules get written. Thanks for watching. This video is based on an analysis by Dr. Andrei Kazantsev-Weissman for the Turan Research Center. I'll leave a link in the description if you want to read the full piece. If you found this video informative, consider subscribing and hitting the notification bell. And let me know in the comments, should Washington fight for a road it doesn't even need, or leave the rules to Beijing?